Hello, you are listening to episode 57 of Keep Blooming. I'm your host, Liz Montigny. This one is for all the moms with littles who may be really feeling the harder parts of mothering. Know that Our Lady is your lifeline. My guest is Michelle Nott, a mom of 5 kids, ages 6 and under, and one little saint lost to miscarriage. She's a blogger, and you can visit her site at rasingsmallthingswithgreatlove.com. On this podcast, we cover Michelle's journey with postpartum depression, how children teach us humility, how creativity helps us heal, and how Our Lady is our lifeline through the hardships and joys of motherhood. This isn't too much of a spoiler alert, but I want to share that since we recorded this interview, Michelle's image of Our Lady of Guadalupe was created by an artist friend of hers and appears on Michelle's Instagram. So check the show notes for that link. Let's get growing and keep blooming. Tired of overthinking your next step? Do you want simple steps to level up your mind, body, and spirit? Or maybe you need some inspiration to reach your goal? Then you've tuned into the right podcast. This is Keep Blooming, and I'm your host, Liz Montigny. Each week, I'll encourage you to drop the hustle mentality for hope and act on the dreams God has put on your heart. Like you, I'm doing all the things as a Catholic, a wife, a mom to 3 boys, and a licensed Ziegler coach. So let's get growing and keep blooming. Hello, my lovely listeners. Welcome to this episode of Keep Blooming. I'm your host, Liz Montigny. Today, I am speaking with Michelle Nott. Michelle, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Great. Well, Michelle is a stay-at-home mom of 5 children, ages 6 and under, and one little saint lost to miscarriage. She is passionate about fitness, mental health, and writing for her blog. She survives on prayers for patience, lots of coffee, and good books. Oh, you got to be careful about praying for patience, Michelle.
Yeah, I've learned that one the hard way.
I know, right? Anything to add to that?
That's pretty much it in a nutshell. 5 kids keeps me busy. 3 of them are in school all day long, so I get to have my 2 younger ones home with me. That's been a lot of fun having more one-on-one time with them, but that's pretty much it. It keeps me pretty busy.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, and that is so key, getting that one-on-one time and getting to know them a little bit more outside of their siblings. I hear
Yes.
you. And listeners, I love to do a little abbreviated Lectio Divina before our conversation, and I've been asking my guests to pick their favorites. And Michelle has picked Isaiah 41:10. Do not fear, I am with you. Do not be anxious, I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my victorious right hand. I love that. It's so comforting and strong. Like, how has this been a part of your journey?
So, I suffered from postpartum depression with my 4th pregnancy. I had my daughter in November, and then that January, my husband had to leave for military training, and he was gone for about 7.5 months. So we were living separately. I was at home with the 4 young ones. 2-month-old is the youngest one, dealing with postpartum depression and then taking care of all those kids. So I was struggling. I was not in a good place mentally. And there's just one day I was on the couch in tears looking through my Bible, and I Googled, what are the best verses for anxiety? And this one came up, and I looked at it, and it was perfect for that moment. And there was a song at the time. I can't remember who it's by or what exactly it's called, but there was a line in it that said, just be held. And that's what I wrote in my Bible next to this verse, is just be held. So letting God kind of hold you while you're not strong, because he is your strength, especially in those times of weakness and in times of struggles.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. And I think too, so many of us can struggle with not letting him hold us.
Yes.
And especially just hearing like, hey, you're basically a single mom at that point, right? With little
Oh yeah.
ones and dealing with all these struggles and crosses. And I could imagine there was probably a lot of pressure on you to just figure it out, right?
Yes, that was not an easy time. That was also kind of post-COVID. My daughter was born in 2020. And so,
Mm,
the whole year after, everyone was recovering, but things still weren't back to normal. So I had already been kind of isolated from community at that time,
yeah.
the year before due to COVID. And then going into my husband being gone and my kids at the time, I think the oldest would have been almost 4. And then youngest was a 2-month old. So other than, going to preschool, we didn't get out much. So I didn't see anyone. I wasn't really able to interact with everyone. I just had to basically help these kids survive for 7.5 months.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So yeah, that
you're,
that part was hard.
you're sitting there, you're crying and you have anxiety. Was the anxiety something that was there before all of this?
Oh no, I have always been an anxious person.
Mm,
Just
hmm.
ever since I was little, I'd worry about everything. I still do. It's
Yeah.
something I'm working on.
You know, there's something so important about community and accompaniment, especially I think, especially when the kids are little.
Yes.
It's when they're little, like you said, we're keeping them alive. The time to
Yes.
survive. And sometimes it can be really hard to see the fun in the joy when you're kind of like the wrangler, right?
Oh,
And
that's exactly how I felt. That
yeah,
feeling joyful during those times, that was something I really struggled with. Well, my blog is named after Mother Teresa. It's called Raising Small Things with Great Love. It's kind of
mm,
a take on her Do Small Things with Great Love
yeah,
quote. I remember during that time, I'd look at some of her quotes about finding joy and everything, and I'd almost feel angry, just like, but I can't, like, why should I?
right.
Life is so hard right now. Why should I feel joy? But
Mm,
then, reading her story also helped me though, because if you look more into her life, she had the dark night of a soul where
yeah,
she could not feel the presence of God. And
yeah,
she struggled with that for years and years.
yeah,
And yet she still always went around with a smile, served others, and was joyful. I mean, no one had any idea that she was struggling this until after her death, when those letters were discovered and shared with
yes.
the public.
Mm,
So
hmm.
I mean, being joyful does make a difference. It's definitely a challenge,
Yeah.
but it does make a difference.
I remember reading that about Mother Teresa and just being like blown away because of just her charity, her love, and also her obedience. I mean, imagine the amount of obedience when you're having the dark night of the soul. I mean, that's incredible faith. And so I think it's so wonderful that you were able to find a saint that you could draw from. And I'm wondering, you know obviously that helps, right, to read about other people's struggles and
Yes.
but they still persevered and so forth. Was your faith the big primary thing that got you through those times, or were there other things that you tried?
I always was thankful that I had my faith, because I just thought of all the other women who struggled with that, with postpartum depression, isolation, or even, anyone who struggled with that and they didn't have faith as a background. I mean, they could go somewhere really, really dark.
Mm,
And that my faith is, what kept me being feeling hope. I mean, without it, I don't know where I would be.
mm,
So that definitely was something that helped me get through that time. Also, I did have people, where my kids went to preschool was where I used to work. I used to work as a preschool assistant teacher there. And so I let them know what was going on in case they saw kind of a change in behavior from my son who was going there, because his dad was going to be gone for a long time.
yeah,
So
yeah,
they knew what was going on. And the first day that he had left, I got asked by his teachers, can we make you dinner? And so they made dinner for us and for our family. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there were still people checking in on us. There were still people
Yeah.
taking care of us.
Mm-hmm.
And that also made a huge difference too. Community really helps at that time.
Yeah. Yeah. It certainly sounds like it. And that takes some guts too, right? To sit there and be like, hey, this is what's going on. And that's really like vulnerable to put yourself out there in that space. But look what happened. People
Yes.
helped. And so I think it's actually so smart and so brave of women when they are suffering to sit there and ask for help. It's not easy to ask for help.
No, it's not. And I mean, I've struggled with my mental health for a while. Like I said, I've always been an anxious child, and there are times in college where I probably should have seeked out therapy, and I didn't because, I always had this idea like, no, I have to be strong. Like I can get
Mm-hmm.
through this. I
Mm-hmm.
don't really want to talk to anyone. When I had my depression episodes with when I was pregnant with my fourth, I could see a shift in my mood. And it comes out, depression doesn't always come out as just these feelings of sadness. It can come out as rage, and it can
Mm-hmm.
come out in so many different ways. And that's what was happening to me. I felt like a monster. I felt like the Mr.
Dr.
Jekyll and
Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
thank you.
yeah,
And that's how I'd feel. It could be anything that would just set me off. And then I'd yell, and I couldn't stand myself because I felt like a monster. And
yeah,
so that's kind of where I realized, look, I have to get help because I need to be there for my kids, and I can't be there for my kids I can't if I'm not well. So
right.
that's when I finally talked to the doctor and just like, look, I'm struggling. And so I was able to get in to see a therapist at that point, and I'm still with the same therapist.
Mhm.
I got on some medication to help me through that time period, and that helped me then too.
Mm.
So it does. It takes a lot of courage, but also a lot of humility. And I think that's one thing parenthood teaches you is humility.
Oh my goodness, isn't that so true? And, at the time we're recording this, I've actually been really meditating on the litany of humility. And I've actually been praying it with my husband. And wow, does that just cut you right into pride and trust and everything? So, I love what you're saying in that, you used all the resources that are available to you. It's so easy to turn inward, but you reached out, and that seems to have made a huge difference. Now you have this blog and you write regularly. Is writing part of the healing process, or is it just, creative outlet? Like, when you want some mom time, you're like, hey, I'm gonna go write. Like, how did this come about?
Kind of all the above. When I first wanted to create a blog, we were living in a smaller house. My family was slowly, getting bigger, and I was thinking of ways, how can I make some money to help our family? And I'd heard about blogs and thought I could do that. But when I started writing, it's like something clicked. And I just really connected more to my faith through writing. So I feel like it's a charism that I have is writing about my faith, but it's also a way for me to process what happened. I wrote about my experience with depression. My therapist really encouraged me to write about it and share about it. And so that was a huge step it's one thing to seek help and talk to someone individually, and then it's another thing to write about it and share it on the internet. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
that was huge, but I've actually had people reach out to me and talk to me about that, or I've also shared about my miscarriage and my experience with that as well. And I've had people reach out to me saying, well, I had a miscarriage too, what should I do? So I feel like in a way it's nice because then people say, oh well, I'm not alone. I'm not going through all these things by myself. So it's a way to have community too. So I've been able to meet people through writing as well, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. And it helps you to know that you are not alone, right? It's not
Yes.
just your
Yes,
reader,
it
right?
goes both ways.
Yeah, it goes both ways. So that's fantastic. And so there's two phrases in the Bible. The first be not afraid is in the Bible, I think about 365 times I read,
Oh, wow.
right? One for each day of the year, right?
Yes.
But then a close second to that phrase is one another. And I mean, that's why we're here, right? You
Yes.
know, we're here to lift one another up and pray for one another and support one another. And it's easy to forget that in the kind of culture we're in. So when you created this blog, did you have any goals in mind with it, or was it just, like an outlet for you?
At first, it was an outlet, and I'd also hoped it would reach more people. Because I mean, when I started it, I was hoping to help my family financially, and it was quickly found out that's probably not going to happen as easy as I had hoped. But I feel like it can be easy to turn something that was just an outlet, a creative way to process and to think and then to help other people, and then look at the statistics and be like, well, why am I not reaching people? Why is this not taking off? And it kind of lets the outside influencer goals affect that. So it's
Mm,
kind of a fine line between, okay, is this what God is asking of me, or is this what the world wants of me?
yeah.
And so that's something I've struggled with too. And I'm definitely still struggling at times with that, but for a while I kind of had to take a step back, and especially when life gets a little bit busier, I'm not as consistent with writing on it unless I feel like something has moved me to write, and then I'll write about that topic.
Hmm.
So that's something that and I've been trying to work on too. So if I catch myself getting too caught up with, well, why didn't this do well? It's like, wait, take a
Right.
step back. Is this where I'm supposed to go?
And that detachment, that can be very hard because, like you
Yes.
say, what the Lord wants and what the world wants are two different things.
Yes.
And if, like you said, if you're not kind of checking in with yourself, hey, why am I doing this? Is it for the glory of God, or is it because,
Right.
I was going to be cool or something, right?
Yes.
So I think that's really important that you do that check-in, and that's not easy to do either. You
No,
have
it's
to sit
not.
there and self reflect and be honest with yourself, and that's something I talk about a lot in my coaching, is just to take the time for that self-awareness. Speaking of time, how are you doing this with the littles?
Um, well, now my older three are at school full day, so I have a little bit more time, and the younger two nap at the same time for the most part. So
Nice.
we're still kind of getting used to new routines, and I'm having to kind of squeeze a little bit here, a little bit there.
Mm,
Um, Usually my kids have quiet time at the same time, even if they don't nap. We still make them have some quiet time. So I'm able to go downstairs and write a little bit. But it's
yeah.
definitely hard. You kind of have to make it a discipline at times. Like even
Mhm.
even days when you don't feel like you should, maybe at least, write one word, or write a sentence.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I've been kind of struggling with. I took some time off over the summer. We were traveling, and then get out of routines, then you have to get back into routine. For me, I try to keep it as part of my routine because I know I thrive on routine.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
one thing I'm trying.
No, that's great. And what I'm hearing is you're working it into the pockets of
Yes.
your life, but at the same time, like you said, having that routine, even if you just write a sentence,
Right.
that is keeping a commitment with yourself. And that's not always easy to do, because it's very easy to brush off and be like, oh, I'll get to it. But then all of a sudden, 2 weeks go by and you're not doing it. I think that's important for others to hear too, whether it's because you have a lot of littles, or just you
Yeah.
have very, you're being pulled into many different directions for whatever reason. If you've made the choice to commit to something, it does have to be a part of almost your everyday,
Yes.
even just a little bit. So thanks for sharing that. And I know we're airing this in December, and there's so many beautiful things happening in December. And one of them, one of the feasts I love, is Our Lady of Guadalupe. And I know you
Yes.
mentioned she is significant for you. I can imagine why, but I would love to hear what the story is there.
I'm a cradle Catholic. but I feel like I had a reversion to the faith. There was a retreat I went on when I was working at that preschool I had mentioned earlier. Another teacher there had told me about it, encouraged me to come, so I did, and my eyes were opened. It just how much more I could be doing to grow in my faith. And so it was after that, I started praying or attempting to pray a daily rosary. I don't know if you've heard of the Instagram group, Many Hail Marys at a Time. My sister told me about them. They usually pray a live rosary. It was on Instagram, and then I think they switched to YouTube.
I think
So
so. Yeah.
I prayed with them consistently and got introduced to more Catholics on Instagram that way. And it was just really, really neat to hear all of their stories. And they also talked about a program they had. It was called Hail 15. So basically encouraging you to kind of do a mini retreat filled with, fasting and praying the rosary, journaling, and just lots of reflection. And it was during that time I had a dream, and I saw it was kind of like a black and white image of Mary. I couldn't see her face, but I could see that she was wearing a veil. And it was lots of different shapes, I think maybe triangles, but the one that stuck out to me were the stars. And I woke up and was like, I want to find out which version of Mary that was. And so for a while I was thinking it was Stella Marie. And then I was talking to my sister, and she was like, no, Michelle, I think that's Our Lady of Guadalupe. And so then I
Mm.
look her up, and she's the patron saint of the unborn, which actually made sense because in my dream, her hand was extended and she was holding a rosary that was acting as an umbilical cord to an unborn baby.
Oh my goodness, how beautiful. Mm.
And so I was taking time to really kind of reflect on, what does this image mean? And for a while, I was thinking maybe I need to do something more with the unborn and speak up about life. And then it was shortly after that I found out I was pregnant with my fourth. So I got a little nervous, just like, well, I don't know what that means. So I didn't share anything about it until after I had given birth to her. But that image has stuck with me. And it was when I had my miscarriage. Later on, I miscarried our fifth about 2 years ago. It was 2 Septembers ago, actually.
Mm.
So the rosary played a huge, huge role in my life then. And I saw something on Instagram. Someone had said, holding a rosary is like holding Mary's hand. And that made me think of that image. Mary's
Yeah.
our lifeline.
Yes. Yes.
And so I had to go in by myself at that time. My husband was watching the other kids, and that's when I received confirmation that our baby had passed. But I was holding on to a rosary in my hand. So Mary was there. And
Mm.
that's when I offered up our baby to her.
Oh.
And my in laws were very, very nice and understanding. And they had told us that the shrine that they lived close to offers burial service. They have a memorial to the unborn. And so they were able to get us a spot, and that's where we buried our baby.
Mm.
And the shrine is Our Lady of Guadalupe shrine.
Look at that. Look how she lined all that up for you. I
Yes,
mean, she kind of prepared you with this image of I have you and I have that baby and every baby, right? And
yes,
how beautiful to think of the rosary as an umbilical cord. I mean,
yes,
that's really stunning. She's always such the good mother. She's so gentle. She's just I don't know the loss of a child. I can imagine in just hearing your story having that image ahead of time and then being able to connect it with what happened. Of course there's sadness and sorrow and that happened to you during the month of the sorrowful mother,
yes.
well, in September. So what a gift. I imagine it's probably hard to see it as a gift when you're going through it or processing it, but that's just really amazing. It's how hopeful.
Yes, and the thing I found about that image of Mary too is the way I see it changes throughout life experiences too. It meant something different to me at that time. It meant something different when I was struggling with depression before I had my miscarriage. It meant something different after. And even today, as I was reflecting on it, I had that right before I found out I was pregnant with my fourth, my daughter Shiloh, and we're going through some things with her right now that have been very challenging, and so now I see that image in a new light because she's there protecting her too.
Oh, wow. This is wonderful. Now, is that something, have you ever thought about creating that image?
I try to draw it out the best I can, but I'm
Yeah.
not the best artist. But yes,
Yeah,
I'd
yeah,
love
yeah.
to. I'd love to eventually create it and be able to share it with others because I know it's been a consolation for me, and I would hope that it would help others as well.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. How beautiful that that image has meant different things as time goes on, but it's always a constant. I
Yes.
love Our Lady of Guadalupe as well for many reasons. We have a print of, her image in our living room that my mother had. And something that always loved about that image is how big her mantle is, how long it is, and like it's
Yes.
like folds and and depending on what image you see, ours is kind of faded at this point, but depending on what image you see, the color of her mantle is like nothing I've ever seen before. It's like not a color that you can recreate. It's like really hard, like in my
Yes.
mind. And just the what that means and how, if she were to extend that, how much it would cover and how much of us it would cover. So there's so many just things there about her in that image. And of course, if you're not familiar with it, for those of you listening, please go look it up. There's so many amazing things about it. It's been studied. It's like a living image. You can look inside her eye and, see reflections of people. I think, is it somewhere on her, the constellation of the date, like
Oh,
stars in the
I don't know if
sky?
I heard that one, but it
Yeah.
wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, right, exactly. There's so much there. It's absolutely fascinating. So if Mary is new to you or you're not familiar with Our Lady of Guadalupe, I really encourage you to look up all the amazing things about it. When you write, is it about these kinds of connections, in faith? Is it more about your family? Tell us about that.
I kind of write based on what inspires me in the moment, I guess.
Mhm.
Sometimes I'll have stuff planned out, just like, oh well, I'd really like to share about just a life update. I could write about my kids and my experiences with them. Um, I'm a runner, so lots of times I'll do my thinking when I run.
Mhm.
Um, and so then if something like if a song I had listened to kind of affected created a thought and then I'd have to write it down. So I've written stuff like that. I've written about books that my family has read. I'm also a contributing writer for Catholic Moms, so lots of times resources are sent my way, and I'm able to read them to my kids or
Yeah.
read them myself, so I can share about those too. But I mean, anything that I read or listen to or just think about that I'm able to connect to my faith, that tends to be what I write about. Or I'll share my struggles too. I've written about my miscarriage. I've written about my struggles with depression, mental health, or even what it's like just raising so many kids so close together.
Right. Right. Yes. Yes. You brought up the littles and how close they are. I know that you struggled with depression and anxiety and finding that joy. There's the faith piece, of course. Okay.
Yes.
And that can't be discounted. And that's such an important piece. But were there also like some really simple practical things that you've done over the years to be like, no, this is fun. They're little and this is fun. What are some of those things?
Walks. We've gone on
Okay.
lots and lots of walks.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think there's something about going outside that kind of helps clears the mind.
Hmm.
Um, and it lets them let out energy. Um, so I would just get all the kids in a stroller, put one in a carrier if I had to, bring our dog, and we just go for a walk. And I mean, if it took us a while, it took us a while. They'd stop, they'd find a dandelion, or they'd collect them for me, or I'd say that they could collect them for Mary.
Mm.
Um, so lots of walks. We've
Yeah.
gone on lots of walks, and that helps. And I think just also knowing your kids helps
Mm,
a lot.
mm,
Lots of people suggest, oh, you can take them to the library reading time. They have story hour, and that works really well for some families. It doesn't work for my family. My kids have so much energy and they can't sit still for the story hour.
yeah.
And my fourth, Shiloh, she struggles with speech and understanding. So for her, she gets overwhelmed in rooms as well, full of
Mm,
people, and she just likes to explore.
mm,
So for her, it's more of taking her to the library so that she can run in the kid area. They have an amazing kid section in our library filled with toys and coloring, and she can just run around there and do her own thing.
yeah.
And it keeps her entertained. I'm not stressed about keeping her sitting still and disrupting from the other class. So that's what works for our family.
Yeah.
And I'm going to splash pads in the summer. That will work too, or just anywhere that's kind of open so they can run, where I don't have to worry about them going into the street, and
Right.
basically just having a game plan and being comfortable enough in the environment.
Mm, mm-hmm.
So that's what works for us. And I think kind of understanding your kids and knowing how they respond to different places, different situations plays a huge factor in just being able to make it through the day. And also just knowing you're going to have bad days. Like
Yeah.
bad days are there, and they're what they are. It doesn't mean every day is going to be a bad day.
Yeah, exactly. And I love what you said about what works for your family. I remember when our kids were younger, I finally got to this point where I was like, that doesn't work for us. And like you said, I can't set myself up for us to fail. Like this is not, what we want to do with our days.
Yes,
For anyone listening who's kind of in that hard season with the littles, and it's hard. Like let's admit that it's hard, okay?
it is.
It is. And don't be afraid to come out and say, hey, no, this is nap time, we're staying home. you know
Yes.
like, and everything's not an obligation. You don't have to say yes to every little thing that comes around. And I think that is really key about what works for your family. And of course, outside there's so many amazing benefits of just being outdoors for everyone.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And just appreciating being outside and the sun and everybody getting rejuvenated, and like you said, the space. So I can really identify with what you're saying there. My children are older now, the 13-year-old, 11 and 10, so I'm moving into a different season.
Yes.
But when I think back on it, it's funny. It's kids have asked me about certain things here and there. Oh, what did we do for this? There are some things I cannot even remember because we were just in it. It's like,
Well,
hey,
I'm
we
lucky
made
if I
it
remember
this
what we
far.
did yesterday. So I mean,
So it's okay to say that motherhood is hard.
yeah. The one thing about motherhood, everyone tells you it's about setting expectations for your kids. It's not. It's about letting go of your own expectations for your kids and
Mm-hmm.
figuring out who they are and where they're going, and
Yeah.
letting them kind of, with rules and boundaries, obviously, but you have to let go of the pressure and your high expectations. Because I know I have high expectations going into motherhood, and just, they all
Yeah.
crumbled.
Yeah, right. It's never what you think. And I think that brings us back to we were talking about before, detachment in humility.
Yes.
And oh my goodness, my kids have taught me so much of that, whether I liked it or not. So I think
Yes.
that is important. And they're their own people. And there have certainly
Exactly.
been times when I have been like, God, you made these people. You need to be in charge of them right now. Open yourself up to that surrender. Absolutely. I'm glad we touched on the hard parts of motherhood, because I feel like you're scrolling or you're hearing from people or whatever, and it's all glorious and Pinterest perfect, and it's like, not really.
Yeah. And that's not
Yeah.
to say that there aren't those joyous times and great
Hmm.
times of motherhood too, but I mean, those aren't the ones talked about. Like, the hard times aren't the
Exactly.
ones that are mentioned. So
Yeah,
the comparison game is hard too.
it is. It is. And it's very much like Mary, right? She had these intense sorrows and these intense joys, and
Yes.
that is motherhood. So, Michelle, bringing us back to our Lectio Divina, and then I want to hear more about, make sure we get to your website and all that good stuff. So again, Michelle had picked Isaiah chapter 41, verse 10. Do not fear. I am with you. Do not be anxious. I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my victorious right hand. Thinking about this passage definitely in terms of the joys of motherhood, super helpful.
Yes.
So, Michelle, tell us, how do we follow you? Where do we go for all those things?
So, over on Instagram, that's probably the social media I'm on the most. You can just look up at Not Family.
Mm-hmm.
And then my actual blog is raisingsmallthingswithgreatlove.com. And that's my website. And then I'm also a contributing writer for catholicmom.com. And my articles come out every third Wednesday of the month.
Oh, nice.
You
So
can
it's
find me over
regular.
there as well.
So, friends, as always, that's in the show notes. So please go look for Michelle there, and you can read her blogs and just get a. Well, Michelle, this was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on and letting me talk. It's been fun.
All right, listeners, let's get growing and keep blooming. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Keep Blooming. Tune in every Wednesday for a dose of hope and encouragement. To be the first to know about my upcoming retreats and latest offerings, become an email subscriber at lizmontignycoaching.com. Have a wonderful week, and remember to keep blooming.